Get started. It is good to be here with you as part of Medium Day. And last year, I observed this is the first time participating. I'm super excited to share with you a little bit of our story and some of the tactics and techniques that we use to reduce the costs. Tony alluded to that a little bit in his keynote. If you follow him on Threads, he's talked a lot about the savings that we've done, and it's been a team effort. It definitely includes everyone from engineering. It's been a lot of fun. So I joined Medium. It was the fall of 2021. I was at a smaller startup. We were acquired and brought in. My background with this fire, this is the office of the company that I used to work for before we joined Medium. And it was in the middle of pandemic. It was quite a time to join. As far as the state of Medium at the time when I joined, these were the two trends that were going on as a business. So hosting costs were trending up and memberships were trending down, neither of which were a very good thing for a business. And so both of those were attacked. I'm going to focus on the hosting costs trending up and some of the things that we did to recover and get that back in a healthier place. So one of the tools that I want to spend a bit of time on is the Amazon AWS Cost Explorer. And you're going to see real numbers here for a lot of what we were doing and the savings that we saw and the spend for our hosting and different services as we go through this. But this was the trend of our monthly spend in Amazon. And if you go into AWS Cost Explorer, that's the first thing that you'll end up seeing is just like, hey, here's how much you're spending every month. And Amazon is one of those services, like a gas pump. You pull the handle, you start using it, you're going to get charged. And so how do you start breaking that down and identifying where's all that money going? The first step is when you go into this Cost Explorer, you drill in, and there's a bunch of parameters on that right-hand side. If you've not been into this, definitely would recommend all of the techniques that we're going to go through. But the highest level you can group by service. This starts showing you, well, what is the spend? So if you were to break down that over $1 million spend in December, a bulk of that spend was on EC2, which is the compute that runs our Kubernetes and all of the infrastructure. But then you can also see some of the other top cost areas. So DynamoDB is one of the databases that we use technologies for a lot of the Medium content. Also S3, lots of other things in here. We're going to drill a little bit more into Dynamo since that is one of the more costly services. There's the true breakdown. Below these charts, it's a tabular format. You can export that into CSV. You can even do lots more calculations and analysis, but this was our starting point when we really started pushing through optimization efforts. Before you can go a level deeper in Cost Explorer, you do need to do some setup, and this is where setting up tags. So in the cost console, you can go to cost allocation tags, and you need to set up some user-defined cost tags. We've done a few. We'll see a few of them today in this presentation. DDB table is one that we did, which is short for Dynamo Database. We also have S3 bucket. We also have RDS cluster. Those are just a few that we've set up. And once you establish those in this cost allocation tags, and then go through each of those resources in the various services and make sure that those tags are set, then you can use those as criteria for the queries in Cost Explorer. One of the tools that you can use to help identify untagged resources is the AWS Resources Explorer. That is something that Amazon has released relatively recent. And if it's indexing all of your infrastructure, you can definitely go through and identify things that are not tagged. But the goal is to get everything tagged, and you can do that at the infrastructure level. You can also use it to track the cost of applications. So if you say app name, you can see their application is used, or services. There's lots of ways you can use this. So let's go back to Dynamo. And so now let's use one of those tags and say, let's group. So we're going to filter our services down to just Dynamo. And then we're going to group it by the DDB table tag. What does this tell us? This tells us what the most expensive tables are, and will give us some clues as to where we want to go, start focusing our efforts. So I'm going to pick just one of the tables to start with. We have a table in Dynamo that tracks every time an email is sent. As you can imagine, that is going to grow over time, and it's going to be a lot of data. And so that we're spending, it was on the orders of $11,000 a month. The other, once you have it drilled in, and so using those same criteria, the tag. So if I was to scroll down the bottom of the criteria here for filters, you could see that I've narrowed it down to just that specific table. Then change your group by to a usage type, and that'll give you a little more insight as to what is going on with that table. And in this case, you can kind of tell that most of what we're paying for is raw time storage and also point in time recovery, which is how we use as one of our backup strategies. And there's certainly writes to this table, but almost zero reads. So is this the most efficient way that we can run this table? Definitely not. In Dynamo, there is an infrequent access table class that you can set, and its pattern, its setup, the performance is the same. It just allows that Amazon behind the scenes to tweak how they store things. And so making one simple change, actually they have an equation. This is from their site. If the storage exceeds 50% of the throughput of your reads and writes on the standard table class, switch to the infrequent access table, and it'll reduce the total cost. So for this table alone, we made the change, and you can see almost immediately with a very simple change, no outage, no downtime, from August to September, it was an easy $4,700 in monthly savings. And you can see how from these stacked bar charts, how the cost shifted. Now, is that continuing to grow? Yes. Are there other tactics that we can do? Is there more cleanup that you could do with the content that's in the table? Yes, to all of the above. But this is one of those that was a no-brainer. And if you multiply this by many tables, this adds up real fast. All right. Another tactic. So this is talking about just making a change to the table. Sometimes you want to delete old data from DynamoDB. So for this email table that we have, say, do we need to keep track of all sends for all time? Probably not. So at some point, those can start rolling off. But there's different ways to do that. And Raphael, who is on our engineering team, he has a post on Medium where he described this process that he did for a table. And you could see the cost implications for just this one table that he was working on. So rather than change the storage type, he created a new table, migrated the good items that we care about to the new table, and then just purged everything. You can certainly go back and delete things, but there's his summary of tables. But yeah, go look up his article on Medium. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit and go towards S3. Oh yes, thank you for sharing that in the chat, Brittany. All right, we're going to apply the same principles to S3, and we're going to mix in a third-party library, and for some pretty impressive results as well. So this is filtering down in our Cost Explorer services down to S3. And this is a view that narrows it down to just the buckets that we use for storing images. As you can imagine, every time somebody writes a post on Medium, there's artwork that is in screenshots, whatever it may be, as that is published as part of the post, that those images have to be stored somewhere and for use. And so you can tell here early on, May 22, that tag was not assigned to the bucket. So you can see that once you assign the tag, then it takes a little bit for the data to come in. But this is where you could start seeing, all right, here's our production bucket that is storing all of the images. And we were spending tens of thousands of dollars or near tens of thousands of dollars on that every month. Then as we got into this project, we also replicate and back up all of those images. And so that is where the purple bucket, when we added that tag. So pushing $30,000 to store all of the images. All right. Using that same technique of changing the group by to a usage type, as you would expect, most of it is just storing. You upload things to your post, and there's occasional reads, but it is nothing compared to just the overall storage. So what happened in April to save $20,000 a month, $21,000 in this case? We used to store, this is where we utilize a third-party library. So Image Proxy, we license this and use this to handle all image generation and display on Medium. Before that, we had an internal service that had been written, and depending on where that post was retrieved, whether it's on a desktop or mobile phone, tablet, every time that was loaded, there would be, if that image format was not in cache, then it would generate. And so not only did we have multiple copies of that same image in lots of different formats, we were also backing that up. Utilizing Image Proxy allowed us to generate all of that on demand, on the fly, and super performant. And once we did that, then it's like, okay, now we've got a lot of cleanup that we can do on those buckets. And so how do you go about deleting terabytes of data? That is where you get into S3 lifecycle rules. And so we did a very targeted set of rules in here that said, okay, go into this path where we had images cached and permanently delete them, expire them, and then permanently delete them. And so if you are not familiar with lifecycle rules within AWS S3, definitely get to know them. It's under the management tab under properties. Another thing that we've used lifecycle policies for, or lifecycle rules, I use those interchangeably, are for transitioning content. So say you have that long running data that you need to keep forever, but you may need access to it in the short term. Then you would want to, after X number of days, in this case, this is one that says after 60 days, let's move it to a Glacier storage. Why Glacier storage? There's lots of different storage classes that you can use for S3, and as you move down that list of storage classes, the cost of storing those bytes goes way down. The being able to retrieve it and easy access. I mean, the further you bury it into Glacier, the harder it is, the slower it is to retrieve, but it's still there. And so consider all the data that you're putting in S3. If you need to keep it long-term, look at using lifecycle rules. But a word of caution, as you go through these efforts and you are trying to clean things up, if you're trying to transition a storage class on a bucket and you want to do it on a large bucket, remember that those actions, was it's analyzing the metadata, those are all API calls uh, to S3. And so this is an example of one table that we changed storage class, and it had to go through every object. And in 1 month, it cost $30,000. But it paid for itself quickly as time went on. So be aware of those any of those things that you do on large buckets. It can add up. And if you have any question, you can go out to Amazon's pricing calculator. This has been super valuable for a lot of the things that we've done. And it will step you through. It's a wizard that will say, hey, for whatever you're trying to do, how many objects, what size, which region, and it'll tell you how much it's going to cost. Okay. Last item, I guess, in the S3 space, there is another tool called Storage Lens. And this is one that we learned this year, actually. And Storage Lens allows you to slice and dice the contents of your buckets and analyze and drill down, and there's lots of metrics that you can analyze. We learned about this multi-part upload, and as you can imagine, you're pushing stuff out to S3. As you're doing that in multiple streams, if any one of those doesn't finish, the bytes that are partially uploaded, they're just left orphaned, and you're left paying for those. And straight from Amazon's documentation, you'll pay whatever the storage class is for those items from when they were uploaded. So as we used Storage Lens and looked at that, and this was just last month, as we peeled back looking for other areas, there's hundreds of gigabytes that are just sitting there, not even used. And so again, use the life cycle rules, and you set it up to say if you can target these incomplete multi-part uploads, and if they haven't been used in 7 days, then delete them. So we've realized more savings there. Lots that you can do on S3 side. Okay, I'm going to switch now to the EC2 and Kubernetes side. This is where the bulk of our spend goes for the compute. And again, you can group this by, this is a grouping showing our savings plans and our EC2 instances. EC2 other is also that's lumped in lots of things from data transfer and networking. But one of the things that we've found success in is the idea of savings plans, and there's also an option for reserved instances. You should get to know which of those make the most sense for you. You can do reserved instances that locks you in at a bigger savings percentage, but it does tie you to you're committed to a specific instance type and family, and it's not as flexible. We've ended up settling on savings plans, which then can be applied to all sorts of compute items. And if you want to change and tune your instance sizes, then it's piece of cake and it still remains covered by a savings plan. The end of last year, we started looking into using spot instances and using Carpenter to help manage that. And so that's where you can see as the price shifted and spot instances were introduced. Spot instances are much cheaper to use, but they are not long-lived instances. And so Carpenter helps manages that. Lastly, as you're looking in your Kubernetes side of things, consider how the pods and how your application is set up. These are just a couple of examples of, on the left, you'll see a bunch of pods or EC2 instances and how much the memory and CPU are used. These add up real fast if they are not fully utilizing the hardware. And so consider how these applications are set up. Tune the memory, tune the CPU. There's tons that you can do with Kubernetes. And all of that allows you to use your infrastructure more efficient. We found tons of savings on this side of things as well. It's very easy for a developer to go ahead and say, hey, here's my code, it's ready to go, ship it. This is what I think it needs. And then how often do you set it and forget it? And so come back to it and follow it through to production and all the way, watch its usage patterns. So with that, man, time flies. This is a team effort. So the best thing you can do is seek to understand your spend. And then there's the side of the infrastructure and software licenses. For us, I know I spent a lot of time on the AWS side, but there are lots of other applications that we use. Revisit those and right size the number of licenses for headcounts. As a business that's been around a while, those definitely were not in alignment with the number of headcount at the time. So there were a lot of things that we did on that side from the infrastructure side. And then on this right side, the applications and code, engineering, test. Everyone should be aware of cost implications as they work on code. One final thing on the awareness and transparency, Amazon has a built-in cost anomaly detection. And so you can go through and configure that as well. And so if anything looks wrong or starts impacting your daily spend, then it will call it out, and you can have it email, you can put it in Slack, and then jump in and address it. And using the tactics and techniques from earlier on, identify where that cost is occurring. One of the most useful things that we've done is look at costs on a daily basis. It's easy to say, well, how much do you spend a month? But really it comes down to how much is it per day. And that is the metric that we're tracking. How much do we spend? All right. Lastly, one of the best things you can do, this is even before I joined Medium, I ended up on Medium many times researching these types of topics. So as you pick any of these, whether it's AWS, Google Cloud, somebody most likely has documented it and done step-by-step how-tos on Medium. And so make use of it. And if we were to look back from December to 2021 to last month, we've cut a significant chunk off. And we continue to find more savings. And so one of the things that's worked well for us is definitely keeping an eye on it, but also spending a little bit of time every week and go on a cost savings hunt. There's always something to find as you dig in.